All right, guys, welcome to Tiger Schulmann's Kickboxing Corner. I'm with Campbell. This is my assistant, Craig Alexander. What we wanted to do last night was UFC 156. Have fun watching?
Oh, absolutely.
Great fights. Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar. Championship fight was the fight of the night, which is always a great thing when you're ordering a pay-per-view and you stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning. And the last fight on the card, the best fight that we saw all night, non-stop action for 5 rounds. Give me a little bit of your thoughts of the fight.
Oh, it was definitely a great fight from start to finish. I definitely thought Edgar won a little bit, but that was
can't really say much for the judges, and it hasn't been a whole lot of outcry. It's definitely a close fight. Yeah. I shared your opinion. I thought he won 3, 4, and 5, but really a great card. I started watching from the prelims on FX at 8 o'clock right through to the final pay-per-view. You know, the Rogerio Nogueira fight, Rashad Evans maybe a little slow. Very technical. Nogueira really able to impose his game plan on Evans, and Evans really didn't have any answer for that. You know, the distance and the boxing skill of Nogueira. What we really wanted to do, though, is we want to break down the UFC fights last night and talk to you a little bit about some of the kickboxing techniques that happened and translate it into what you might be looking for in your training. So you can take those techniques that you saw in the UFC, and God forbid you're ever in a street situation, you can understand what different fighters were looking at and how they utilize different techniques to control their fight. In some cases, to win. In some cases, we're going to talk to you about techniques that they did that might have earned them a loss or gave them a chance to win. So, give you a little bit of our credentials for us. Craig and I both trained directly under Tiger Schulmann. Tiger Schulmann's a legend in the martial arts community. Back in the 70s and early 80s, competed in the bare knuckle competitions, Kyokushin karate, when many of the more famous movie stars, the guys that went into the movie career, Chuck Norris, Don Wilson, they were competing with boxing gloves and shin guards and, you know, American rules kickboxing, no kicks below the waist. Tiger Schulmann was competing in bare knuckle competition. He was undefeated for 6 years. Still blows my mind every time I talk about this, but from the time he was 15 to the time he was 21, a record that's still unparalleled to this day. The only thing you could really say that would be close to it this day would be Anderson Silva. Right? But imagine if Anderson Silva was fighting in the UFC, but there were no weight divisions. There were no age limitations, right? He started in the UFC at 15 years old and was fighting a guy like Alistair Overeem. That was the competitions that Tiger Schulmann was competing in, the bare knuckle tournaments, no weight divisions, no age divisions. So at 15 years old, fighting adult men, and for 6 years, undefeated in competition in North America. Really an amazing record. Very proud to have him as my teacher. I've been training directly under him for the last 10 years. Craig with me for the last almost 8 years. He's got a very successful amateur MMA career going now. Craig's now 9-3. 9-3-1. One cut, stopped the fight in no contest. Undefeated in his last 3 fights, really undefeated in his last 4 years of MMA competition. Looking forward to see where he goes. I was a professional kickboxer. Fought in the World Combat League. Fought Anthony Njokuani, who now fights in the UFC. A couple other famous boxers who I was able to compete against. That's a little bit of our credentials. We've been doing this for every day for 10 years. I've been teaching kickboxing. I want to try and break down for you guys so you can really understand what it is you're seeing and how it would translate into a street self-defense situation. So I want to go back to the very first fight we saw on the pay-per-view. Yves Edwards, Isaac Valley Flag. And Isaac Valley Flag's he's been around for a long time. Been fighting professionally for over 10 years. Trains at Jackson's gym in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So he's got good training partners, good coaches. Yves Edwards been around for a long time. This was a stand-up fight, and I was very surprised by this because Yves Edwards, one of the slickest kickboxers, one of the most dynamic kickboxers in the UFC. A lot of the highlight reel knockouts in the UFC, Yves Edwards shows up on, and Isaac Valley Flag was able to win a split decision. There's a couple things that he did throughout the fight that I think were very important to him winning that split decision. Now, Edwards was fighting from a southpaw stance the whole fight. Valley flagged the righty. And what he didn't want to do, Edwards may be a little more dynamic, maybe a little more explosive. So what Valley Flag has to do is control the distance. Make sure that he has a chance to have the time to see any of those techniques that Edwards might be throwing. So one of the things we could do to control distance, and Valley Flag did it great. Instead of being a little closer where they're in punching range, and some of the head kicks that Edwards is known for, the low kicks that he throws with such power and such speed, Valley Flag wouldn't have enough time to react. So Valley Flag was actually standing in one of two places. He was either here, just a little bit further out of range where he had plenty of time to see those techniques coming. Now, how's he going to keep Edwards from getting closer? What he was using was great. He was using a right leg against the lefty, right leg kick to the solar plexus with that front kick, able to drive that kick consistently throughout the fight, using the ball of his foot, just nice and smooth, putting that kick into the stomach, and it kept the distance for him. Now, what was great is when you throw that kick, you're driving that hip, and then what Valley Flag would do is he would sometimes drive a hip and throw a straight right hand, and he was landing a lead straight right hand very consistently throughout the fight. Now, when you watch that fight, what happened towards the end of the third round?
Started to gas a little bit. Edwards started to get more and more tired.
Edwards started losing steam as that fight went on, and it was a split decision. So Valley Flag got the third round on 2 of the judges' scorecards, and I think that the toll of those front kicks, it's not a kick that you're trying to kill the person in one shot. You're trying to do it over and over again. He landed 8 to 10 of those shots through the course of the fight, and it started to take a little of the steam away from Eve Edwards. Still a very close fight, very entertaining throughout. I'm sure, you know, in the annals of the UFC, Dana White's very well known for, you know, handing some cash to the guys backstage that do a really good job. I'm quite sure Eve Edwards is going to get a little extra, even though he might not have gotten his win money from his contract. He's going to earn some money for the great fight he put up. But a very good debut in the UFC for Isaac Valley Flag. And I said he had 2 distances. He stayed way out here. The other distance he would get in close and do a little work in here, smothering Eve Edwards, getting so close that Edwards didn't have a chance to create that power, you know, that you need a little bit of distance to create some of that acceleration to really strike that hard. That was one fight, and it was a great way to start it off. Very good way. It set the tone for the rest of the evening. 9 fights, I guess, that I watched, 9 or 10 fights. All of them very exciting. You know, the Nogueira-Evans fight we talked about, maybe a little slow, but still technically was a battle. There was kind of like more of a chess match than a kickboxing or MMA fight. Still very exciting, though. Next fight I want to talk about, unbelievably exciting. Evan Dunham, Gleison Tibau. Very distinct difference in the posture, in the physique of these two, right? 170 pounds, both of them the same weight. Evan Dunham a little taller, very lanky. Tibau, a little shorter, squat. That guy's like built like a fire hydrant. The guy is just jacked. And we know Tibau, when he fights at 170, will go into the ring. 155, you're right. Will go into the ring upwards of 190 pounds. He'll gain 35 pounds from the weigh-in on Friday to the fight on Saturday evening. That's a pretty remarkable thing for somebody to do. Now, they're both lefties. I'm going to demonstrate this from the right-handed stance. That's both of our natural stances. It doesn't really make a difference, just kind of like looking in the mirror. I want to talk about what Dunham did. Again, he won a decision, and won a decision pretty handily over Tibau. And what do we do? Well, if you're fighting somebody who is stronger, bigger, bulkier, but a little shorter, what you want to do is you want to make sure that they can't reach you, that they can't hit you with their punches. And we talked about Isaac Valley Flag using the front kick because he didn't have a reach advantage over Eve Edwards. He used that front kick to maintain his distance. Evan Dunham, straight punches. He used the jab straight out. Now, if I throw my jab and I hit Craig, and Craig throws his jab, he can't really reach me. I'm a little bit longer than he is. My hand hits him before his hand hits me. Now, the thing that really worked in Dunham's favor in this fight, Tibau doesn't throw straight punches, right? He loads up on everything. Every punch that he throws, he's trying to knock someone out. So what Dunham did very successfully, he would throw his punch straight out and keep himself as far away from Tibau's power as he possibly could. Now, he still wanted to throw some power of his own, wanted to throw that cross punch, right? But when he threw it, did something very technically sound. He would throw his jab first, he would throw his cross, and his head would move all the way over to the side. So Tibau, we'll switch to lefty so you can see this. If he threw his straight left hand, Tibau's right hand had nothing to hit Dunham's shoulders up. And the left hand of Tibau, Dunham had his right hand right there ready if he needed to parry that shot. No problem. So he would throw the jab way back. And if he did throw that cross, he'd bring his head way out to the side where his shoulders covering the head. And if that other side did come, if that straight left hand went, then it's going to miss him because his head's out of the way. Or if Tibau's good enough to see where Dunham's head was, Tibau had his other hand right there ready to defend. Really through the whole fight. consistently able to do that. Was shooting takedowns. T-Bow was able to defend the takedowns. Even when Dunham was able to secure a takedown, T-Bow would get right back up again. So that really wasn't the story of the fight. The story of the fight was the distance. Dunham able to keep T-Bow at a range where he couldn't use his power and bulk. And then again in that fight, towards the end of the fight, because T-Bow kept having to try and press and press and press, and Dunham was just kind of relaxed, staying out of range, T-Bow started to gas, right? Part of the trouble of cutting down to 155 pounds when you're naturally 190, you take a little toll there, right? So conditioning, very important. And if you're training in self-defense, that should be a very important part of every class that you take, where you're challenging your conditioning, because just as important in a fight as your technique, right? We want to marry those two things together so we really defend ourselves. Next fight we want to talk about is actually two fights, and something similar that happened in both fights. The first fight, Benavidez-McCall, right? That lead off the pay-per-view.
Oh, yeah.
I think they started the pay-per-view. Yeah, the UFC is very smart, right? When they start a pay-per-view, they usually take the fight they think is going to be the second most exciting, or even maybe the most exciting. The headline fight, the pay-per-view headliner, will be the most famous person or the title bout, but they'll start the pay-per-view out with the most exciting fight to try and get fans hooked in. And McCall-Benavidez, man, what a non-stop battle. So the fight I want to compare that to is Overeem versus Bigfoot Silva. And something happened in both fights that was very similar, but it had a different outcome, right? So both righty versus righty matchups, and McCall and Benavidez, man, the little guys, they're so fast. And Benavidez had a very big game plan, very strategic. When McCall would attack him, he would not give ground at all. He wouldn't move. He'd set his feet, and McCall would come in and attack, and Benavidez would put his hands up, and he would strike right back with power shots from a nice solid stance. So anytime that McCall went on the attack, pop, pop, boom, 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 Benavidez would come right back with power shots of his own. He set his feet, standing right in front of his opponent, which is dangerous. But he got away with it, especially at 125 pounds, because power is mass times acceleration, right? At 125 pounds, even though Ian McCall hits pretty hard, he's 125 pounds, there's not as much power. So Benavidez was willing to take a shot to give a shot, set his feet. McCall's having to jump in, not as set, not creating as much power. Benavidez sets his feet and counters. Again, a very close fight. Could have gone either way. I think Benavidez won 29-28 on all three cards, but very close fight. Yeah. Not a huge difference in the two. Just a little technique that we saw that was very clear. Now, Benavidez was attacking as well. He was on the offense on a consistent basis, but anytime McCall would jump in at him, you saw Benavidez set his feet. Next fight, same thing. Bigfoot Silva versus Overeem, right? As that fight was going on in the first and second round, Overeem really kind of controlling the stand-up altercation. You see Bigfoot Silva very deliberate, tentative, deliberate in his kickboxing. Like, there's no explosiveness to it. There's no deception to it. Hands are straight up and down. Everything you see coming. And Overeem was keeping his distance a little bit. I think the one thing I might have liked to have seen from Overeem is a little more action in the first couple of rounds. Now, it's the first time he's been in the ring for a while. Just got back from a suspension, so maybe a little worried about gassing out. But as the fight went on, he started to get a little bit more confident, Overeem. And then it led to something in the third round that got him in a lot of trouble, right? He got in close. And when you're fighting a guy that's 265 pounds, there's a lot of mass there. There's going to be a lot of power. And he tried to do what Benavidez did, right? Try to put his hands up and take one. The problem was he didn't throw back. He didn't come back at Silva. And what happened is Silva hit an overhand right and put it right on the temple. And that stunned him. Again, your arms are not big enough. These are big gloves. And I still can't cover my whole head. Imagine you're wearing 4-ounce gloves. Those aren't going to cover. Like, if I take these gloves off, and I put them on the ground, I can't cover my whole head. There's too many spaces for a fist to sneak through and hit. And with a guy that hits as hard as Pajal, as Bigfoot Silva, you don't want to take one shot. And that's all it really took, right? That one shot led to a succession of 7 or 8 more. And it's actually kind of sad to see it. It kind of, Overeem took a beating there in that fight. He was here, took the overhand right off the side of the head. Then Silva came right back, uppercut, right underneath. That turned him sideways. and he took a right hand straight off the side of the jaw. Now, there were a couple other shots in there that hit him, but those were the shots that really did the damage. The overhand right to the temple, stunned him a little bit, uppercut, turned him, straight right hand. And Pajal, man, we said deliberate, but man, very nice technique. Everything he threw, straight down the middle, all of his body weight right behind his punch. So he put 265 pounds behind that right hand, and it took its toll on Overeem, no doubt about it, right? So 2 examples of setting your feet hands up and how one worked and one didn't. What did Benavidez do that Overeem didn't? Well, first of all, he's fighting a guy that's 125 pounds. You're going to be able to deal with that power a little bit better than if you're fighting a guy that's 265. Even if you're 265, your body's not going to absorb twice as much power. It's not built that way. That's why you see more one-punch knockouts in the heavyweight and the higher weight divisions. Lower weight divisions, you see knockouts usually are more of a cumulative effect. Something where someone got hit over and over and over again. Right? Got to talk about the last fight. How often was it on the ground? 25-minute fight.
Seconds, a little bit.
Less than 10 seconds in total, right? I think Edgar scored a few different takedowns, but Aldo able to stand up the whole time. So let's talk about what the two were doing and what worked for Aldo, what worked for Edgar. Well, what was working for Aldo?
Leg kicks in the beginning.
Leg kicks in the first 2 rounds, and he did something really cool. If you see the slow-mo, you saw him take Edgar out in the second round twice, put him on the ground. He was taking his foot, his first metatarsal, right, that first bone that connects your big toe to your ankle, and he was hooking that right behind the knee, right there. Boom, hooking that knee. And then what you saw after a while in the second round, after he landed a few of them, he was sweeping that leg so hard that it was taking Edgar out. Now, Aldo, his low kicks are so ridiculously powerful. In Muay Thai, we'll do what's called a gallop, right? We'll do a little jump to create some extra power to hit that shot. Aldo wasn't doing that. Aldo was just turning his hip like he was throwing a right hand, right? Like it was a straight right. He would throw that right hand, and then he would throw that low kick. And it's very hard for his opponent to know which thing is happening. Now, we were a little surprised. Both of us thought 3-4-5 went to Edgar because in 3-4-5, Aldo didn't throw that kick again. And his whole reasoning for it is when he did throw the kick, Edgar would catch and score a couple of takedowns, right? Was able to actually get Aldo down. Gotta say welcome to little Campbell over there. That's Ashton making her debut on camera. Very surprised that Aldo stopped throwing those kicks. Even though Edgar scored a couple takedowns from catching the leg, the damage was so phenomenal that he was doing to the leg. You could see it. He was knocking him on his rear end actually with low kicks. And then he was able to get right back up every time that Aldo or that Edgar scored a takedown. So I wasn't sure exactly why he was so worried about those takedowns. It seemed like he was able to get right back up again. Shouldn't have been that big a deal. Even on a judge's scorecard, you can't expect the judge to give a round for a takedown if the guy gets right back up again. The takedown does no damage whatsoever. Now, what did Edgar do? Why did you think he won? One, I thought he gassed Aldo out. I thought he had his foot on the accelerator for the last 15 minutes of the fight. Beginning of the fight, very clearly, Aldo was in control. He was on the offense. He was moving forward. After that, Edgar, I thought, wore Aldo out. And what did he do that I don't think anyone else has ever done to Aldo? Well, it's what Edgar does to everyone. His movement is so ridiculous. His footwork is so phenomenal. His conditioning. And the way I want to explain this is, imagine you had a circle, right? There's 360 degrees in that circle. And you draw an arrow in every one of those degrees, right? 360 of them. Which direction is Edgar moving? Everyone except one, right? The only direction that Edgar never moves in, he never moves straight backwards. Never goes straight back. Because if you go straight back, your opponent can go straight forward and hit you with power shots. And of course, it's much quicker to move forward than it is to go backward. But Edgar will go in every different direction. You'll see him going here. There's one other guy that does it a little bit. Dominic Cruz fights a little different than Edgar, but similar as far as the conditioning and the amount of movement that he does. You know, Cruz has it like he looked like he's salsa dancing when he's doing his kickboxing. Edgar's a little more set in a stance, always ready to throw. So you're fighting him, and he's moving around, he's going from angles, and then he's punching, and you don't know that punch is coming anytime. He's always ready to punch. So something you can practice is you're in your rhythm, and you're just moving. different angles you're moving to all the time. You can move. If I drew north, south is back, east, west, northeast, northwest, southwest, southeast. Practice moving in those different directions. I'm here. I can move here. Keep my opponent in front of me. I can move here. I can move backwards a little bit to the side. I can move straight to the side. Backwards to the side. Backwards to the other side. Forward to the other side. Moving in all those different directions so that you can incorporate it in the way that you spar, right? The way that you spar is going to be the way that you fight. So I know that Frankie Edgar's practicing that stuff every single day. Just like Aldo was practicing what I think won him the fight, which was his ability to hide a straight right hand. See the hip movement, straight right hand or low kick. Which one's coming? There's no way to know, right? That's what you want to do with your technique. You want to practice your technique so much so that an opponent has no idea what you're going to do next. A few different things. You talked about valley flag, using the front kicks from distance against the lefty, able to keep the distance, knock the wind out, right? The gas tank, you hit someone in the body, you empty their gas tank a little bit. We talked about Benavidez and Overeem, how they use their defense. One worked, one didn't. We talked about Dunham using his straight punches. And of course, the Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar fight. Jose Aldo using those low kicks in the right hand. Power shots, hitting with power shots. And then Frankie Edgar, of course, using his movement and his conditioning, what I thought won him the fight. But what do I know? The judges give it to Jose Aldo. We certainly look forward to seeing Frankie Edgar fight again. Craig Alexander, Thad Campbell. This is your Tiger Schulmann's Kickboxing Corner for UFC 156. Make sure you tune in with us very soon. We got a couple of more events coming up in February. Really looking forward to breaking down the different kickboxing techniques that you see.